Hello again. In the description to this video, I give the statistics for deaths registered in England and Wales for the week ending April the 28th this year. These have been collated and issued by the Office for National Statistics, a government department, and may be treated as reliable. The figures for Scotland and Northern Ireland are roughly similar. I will mention again that the only way you can really tell what's happening with deaths in this country is by looking at these figures, the overall deaths. There's no point looking at the causes or what was on the death certificate. That can be misleading. The only way to know if something is going on, if there's really an epidemic or if the situation is serious, is by looking at those raw data. How many people died in a week? And that's what we're looking at here. We learned that the number of deaths was above the 5-year average in private homes. It was 23.3% above the 5-year average. That's, say, 646 excess deaths. In hospitals, it's 10.7% above the 5-year average, 521 excess deaths. In care homes, 8.4% above. That's 186 excess deaths, and in other settings, 14.3% above the 5-year rate, 117 excess deaths. That is a total of 1,470 people dying in that week, that is to say the last week in April, that was above the 5-year average. Remember too that that 5-year average includes the years of the COVID epidemic, which made the figures particularly high for those 5 years. And you'll see at once that this is a dreadful situation. If we had this death rate for a year, then it would mean that over 76,000 people more than usual would be dying in 1 year, in the coming year. Can anybody seriously doubt that something very, very odd is going on here? Just for comparison, that 76,000 is roughly the number of people who died with COVID in England and Wales in 2021. In short, we are in the grip of a crisis which is probably as severe as that which COVID represented, and yet in stark contrast to the hysteria which surrounded that disease and the Herculean efforts in which we were all enjoined to take part, the sober government announcements, the tears, the atmosphere of gloom, protecting the NHS, the Prime Minister appearing regularly next to some professor or other, we are now in the midst of a health crisis every bit as grave as that, and yet I hardly even see it mentioned anywhere at all. It's certainly not the first item on the news, is it? All that fuss about the 77,000 people who died with COVID in 2021, and now, 2 years later, nobody bats an eyelid at a death rate which is almost identical. I will leave it to viewers to decide for themselves what is actually going on here and what was actually going on 2 years ago, because I have not the slightest doubt that something odd has happened and is happening still. Click on the link and look at the government's own figures and then ask yourself why the rising death rate in this country is not headline news.